It's no surprise that the Trump administration and Trump himself are working overtime to delegitimize Special Counsel Mueller's investigation into potential obstruction of justice and collusion with Russia. Now, Trump is now attempting to do something that, in my opinion, is potentially very destructive and could lead to a considerable amount of violence. He's trying to make the case that people like Mueller and people who are investigating this whole potential Russia debacle might be trying to rig the midterm elections. Let me give you the details. The 13 angry Democrats, plus people who worked 8 years for Obama working on the rigged Russia witch hunt, will be meddling with the midterm elections, especially now that Republicans, stay tough, are taking the lead in polls. There was no collusion except by the Democrats. There were more tweets, but I want to start with that because that is planting a very dangerous seed in the minds of incredibly unhinged people that could carry out acts of violence if the midterm elections don't pan out the way that they want.
So let's break down all the lies, deceptions in just that one tweet. And again, I think the most important point is the one Anna just made about how dangerous it is. First, 13 angry Democrats. Robert Mueller is a lifelong Republican, not remotely true. The person who appointed him, Rod Rosenstein, a Republican appointed by Donald Trump. The agents working on the case, no one knows. No one knows if they're Democrats or Republicans. So there was two people who didn't want Trump elected. They're nowhere near the case anymore. And by the way, they also hated Hillary Clinton. Okay, any piece of information we've gotten about any of the agents that actually work on the case or the people involved in the FBI, Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, Republican. They're all Republicans, right? So do I know that all 13, if it is in fact 13 people in the special counsel thing, are all Republicans? No, I don't know that either. But so far, the ones we know are all Republicans, okay? So it's just a brazen, usual Donald Trump lie. We just gotten used to the fact that the president's a complete and utter liar and does it for his own purposes. And we've also gotten used to the fact that Republicans in this country have lost their mind and they don't care. They don't care that their president is an obvious liar, right? So, but then it gets worse. So they're going to meddle in the midterm elections. So are you, like, if they lose, the Republicans lose, this monster is gonna turn around and say, the Democrats fixed it. Now get angry and do something about it, right?
That's scary stuff.
It is, that's fascism, man. That's right there. This is not on the road to fascism. This is not, hey, whoa, be careful with that word. No, if they seize power in an election, by the way, they didn't win the popular vote on. This is fascism 101. Then they say, go get all of our political opponents. And then they say, well, the guys who are trying to bring rule of law are our political opponents. And they're the ones who are cheating, not me. Even though they're calling me out on breaking the law, no, I'm gonna flip it on them and pretend they're the ones doing it. Now, all my mindless followers who are authoritarian by nature, sick them, right? And so this is leading down a terribly dangerous road. And then at the end, he says, there was no collusion except by the Democrats. Now, what charge of collusion is there on the Democrats' part? Now, the Democrats might have done 100 other things wrong, but colluding with the Russians, what are you talking about? Again, not attached to reality, doesn't have to be, but it is a good pretense for putting your opponents in jail. Okay, I get rid of the people investigating me, I put them lackeys in there, and then I start going around and arresting people. By the time the arrests have begun, oftentimes it's already too late.
What concerns me is that this is a huge story. Again, let me reiterate, he is planting a seed so people get incredibly angry and riled up if the elections don't work out the way that they wanted to. They're gonna think that things are fixed. And then no one is really emphasizing this story because every day the news cycle is flooded with all sorts of terrifying, crazy stories, right? And so if there isn't a lot of attention on this, and if we aren't planning ahead to make sure that things don't become violent and we don't move even closer to a fascist state, I mean, what's gonna happen? You're right, I'm worried that there's gonna be inaction. And by the time people wake up, it's gonna be too late. And I'm also concerned about the people who are running for office, either on a state level or a federal level. what if they get targeted? This is not okay. This type of rhetoric is not okay.
Now, the media, unfortunately, is a huge part of the problem. And you're gonna think, well, no, they call them out on this, and they partly do. And they say, well, it's not accurate, etc. But they're afraid of offending Republican viewers and readers, if there is any Republicans left reading. So what do? They treat it with kids' gloves. But in reality, like if you were to say, hey, the elections are rigged by a number of different factors based on how many voting booths are open and how many are closed. Does the DNC favor the establishment candidates? So does the RNC. And you list legitimate factors. Those are good, legitimate things to talk about. Hey, it's rigged by all the money that's flooding into the elections, et cetera, right? But if you think that the special counsel's office is going to somehow rig the midterm elections, you're a flat out lunatic. There's no ands, ifs, or buts. But the media will never call you a lunatic because, well, we don't want to offend some poor, but a significant percent, 30% of the country at a minimum now have lost their minds. But they're viewers, and I need money, and I need advertisers, and they're readers, and I don't want to offend the lunatics. You got to call them what they are. If you think the special counsel's office is going to somehow get into the voting rolls and rig the election, you're insane. You're criminally stupid. And they're going to take advantage of that to lead down this incredibly dangerous road. So if you think that media is being tough on Trump, not nearly enough.
Remember, around election time, Leslie Moonves, who is the head of CBS, said that Trump is good for business. Love him or hate him, he's good for business. He's good for ratings. And so Trump, this administration, everything that's happening right now is great for the mainstream media. And you're right, they don't want to isolate or say disparaging things about his supporters because those are potential viewers, which I find pretty devastating and also embarrassing considering how aggressively Trump attacks them and calls them fake news. I mean, he has lodged so many attacks against them to the point where there is a significant part of the country that thinks, no, these are not legitimate news organizations. They fabricate stories.
Well, and fascism takes advantage of weakness. So I'm not in the camp of going around punching people who you think are Nazis, okay? But I am in the camp of fighting back politically, super aggressively. And oh, God help us, because in opposition are the feckless Democrats and the media who likes to call things even. They like to oh, well, hey, you attacked us. I mean, just the other day, Maggie Haberman, this is a tiny, tiny thing, and I'm not in the camp of making a federal case out of this, but the other day took a lie that Trump did and called it a apparent falsehood. So the point isn't that particular phrase and her reporting. The point is, if the press thinks I'm going to do Queensberry rules and a fascist thinks I'm going to lock you up, you idiot, the fascist is going to win.
They're afraid to ever use the word liar because liar means that there was intent to mislead.
Yeah, of course there's intent.
And they don't want to go that far. We don't know. We don't know. Did he intend to lie?
This is a literal question to everyone that works in media. You only have three options. One, you actually think, well, there's a legitimate chance that the special counsel's office is going to rig the midterm elections. Option number two is, that is obviously an intended lie to attack the people who are investigating for potentially breaking the law. So are you going to call it a lie or are you not going to call it a lie? It is intentional. You can't possibly think it's not intentional. Or the president has lost his mind. Absolutely, utterly insane. Those are your three options. One of the options is not, well, perhaps he thought it was around the edges. Like maybe they're going to interfere in just some of the swing states, but not in all the swing states. Really? That's not legitimate. But so just call it out. Otherwise, resign. Don't be in media.
Real quick though, there is a double standard because remember, during the primaries in the last general election, and I'm talking about the primaries between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, when there were legitimate concerns that the DNC was manipulating the primaries in Bernie Sanders' favor, not in Hillary Clinton's. That would be hilarious. In Hillary Clinton's favor, How did the mainstream media handle that? I was on a panel at Politicon that was supposed to be supportive of Bernie Sanders, by the way, and the deck was stacked against me. There were like 5 people on that panel who were anti-Bernie Sanders, trying to make it seem like it was laughable that the DNC would do anything to manipulate the primaries in Hillary's favor. What ended up happening later? I mean, come on, there is a double standard. When it comes to Trump, it's like, I don't know, maybe there is some issue here. But when it comes to, progressives and those on the left, we're all crazy. There's no way that there was any meddling or manipulation in those primaries.
Because they fear conservatives and they have disdain for progressives. So they don't realize it, and if you ask them, they'd be, or you told them, they'd be confounded, and they are. And every time we mention it, they get so hurt by it. But the reality is they have a massive bias against progressives. They think, oh, you progressives, you're never gonna amount to anything, and you're never gonna win. And so if you say the DNC is rigging it in favor of Hillary Clinton, having less debates, counting all the superdelegates first, ridiculous. Oops, it turns out you were 100% right, but I never admitted it, never. Did Brian Stelter or anybody else on CNN come out and say, I'm sorry, you guys were right and we were wrong? And the way that we pretended that the DNC was not obviously on the side of Hillary Clinton while we sucked up to power, we were wrong, never. But when a conservative says, oh, I got an idea, I think Mueller is gonna fix the elections in the midterms. Maybe, could be, can't tell, can't tell. 2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below, then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.